Thank you so much, Peg, and welcome everyone to this Thursday night at Mountain Cloud. A special welcome to Karin Kempe Ryuku, who's here with us tonight to offer this talk. Just a word of introduction. Karin began her Zen practice in 1971 at the Rochester Zen Center with Philip Kapleau Roshi. So there's a kind of full circle to welcoming her to Mountain Cloud. She also studied with Tony Packer and received Dharma transmission from Gary Shishinwick, who's a Dharma heir many of you know from Taizen Maizumi Roshi. And also Dharma transmission Karin received from Dana and Henry Roshi at the Zen Center of Denver. She has been co-spiritual director at the Zen Center of Denver with Peggy Sheehan Roshi, who spoke to us a few months ago. For her professional life, Karin was for 20 years a physician, a family physician, while raising her own family. I first met her some years ago at an American Zen Teachers Association meeting. My first time to gather with that amazing group of teachers, sort of across traditions in the United States. And I remember really clearly that Karin spoke, and just enjoying her contribution to that meeting. And then since then, I've just appreciated Karin's posts in the American Zen Teachers Association, that sort of listserv that goes around. So it's really a great joy to have you here, Karin, at Mountain Cloud. And we look forward also to having you here in person, which I understand is very likely to happen. So with a welcome from all of us, Karin Kempe Roshi.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll do a sound check. Can you hear me okay? Can I see some thumbs? Is it good? Okay.
Yes, it's good.
I looked quickly at the participants and saw somebody that I've known for 50 years here. So I have to say hi to Tom. We were young and crazy together. I want to thank you all for inviting me to join you tonight, especially, of course, to Valerie and to Henry, who I know he's not here right now, but I felt for a long time that the practice at our temple and at your temple has been very complementary. And, you know, even some of the evolution has been kind of parallel. So I'm honored to be here, and I continue to learn from both of your teachers. So thank you. So our ancestral teacher, Dogen, wrote that practice is enlightenment and enlightenment is practice. You know, it's the kind of statement that just sounds great. It really does, even simple, but I'm not sure it's that easy to really understand because it doesn't always feel that way. Practice can seem pretty hard sometimes, against the grain, kind of like walking uphill. And instead of floating in harmony with everything as it arises, carried in the stream of our mental preoccupations, instead we're trying to remember to hold a koan or return to our breath, or even just to simply stay with the actual experience of this moment. You wouldn't think it would be so hard to do. The wisps of thought that quickly pass, the aching in our body or in our heart, maybe a feeling of fatigue or dullness, whatever we find actually present right now. So much of our effort goes into escaping our raw experience. that to be consciously present seems at times to require a heroic resolve, a kind of grit that can feel at odds with what we imagine the flow of spiritual experience to be. And it's this remembering to come back, which after all is a kind of effort or intention that undermines our dream state. And often it does not feel smooth or even particularly natural. And this is especially true during longer periods of sitting, after our initial enthusiasm and the push of our adrenaline wears off, and we may find ourselves sore and tired, and the immersion that we anticipated seems so very distant. It can feel like trying to run through a thick and opaque fog, and we face our own resistance that comes up over and over again and meet our self-doubting thoughts. So we wonder, how can this possibly be enlightenment, liberation, spaciousness? How on earth did we end up here now? And yet, we are here. It is now. Right now. At the end of the Genjokoan, the koan of everyday life, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, there is this exchange which is recounted by Dogen. And I apologize to anybody who truly speaks Chinese. Priest Pao Che of Ma Ku Shan was fanning himself. A monk approached and asked, "Sir, the nature of wind is permanent. There is no place that it does not reach. Why then must you still fan yourself?" "Although you understand that the nature of wind is permanent," the master replied, "you do not understand the meaning of its reaching everywhere." "What is the meaning of its reaching everywhere?" asked the monk. The master just fanned himself, and the monk bowed. The nature of wind is permanent. No place it does not reach. Well, we're told that the nature of mind, my nature, your nature, the nature of all things is nothing but Buddha, already complete and perfect, present now in each moment, no matter what. Permanent. How do we experience it? And what about the reaching everywhere? How does this wind touch you and me? Why do we find ourselves fanning so hard, raising that wind energy, making an effort to sit still, remembering, returning to this moment now, to our breath or to our mu, if that's your koan? Why, if it's already here, do we need to do anything? Do we really have to practice to experience it? What do we have to bring to the table so that the spiritual meal, which we're told is already ready for us, can be tasted and eaten and digested? So that what is already innate becomes real for us, that we realize it. That's what realize means, as our own eyes and hands. You know, when we first come to Zen, we may not know much about the actual tradition or any forms. We may not know how to chant or when to bow. We may not even be able to sit still very well, much less work skillfully or patiently with our habits of body and mind. But we do already have two important latent capacities which we can nurture in ourselves and protect. Continue to protect. And if we aren't already aware of them, maybe we can uncover and cultivate them. One is our capacity for openness, for wonder, our ability to be struck dumb in awe, to experience joy, to be amazed. This is our own beginner's mind, the child mind each of us already has. Untarnished mind of already not knowing, but of living this moment for the very first time. Playful and receptive. It may get covered up or repressed, but each of us already has this mind. Innately, we have it. And the other capacity is that of inquiry. Your very own why or what? The willingness to ask the deepest question you might not even have the words for. A question that for me, still after 50 years of practicing, it's still there for me. To look, to listen, to probe your experience with the open eyes and ears of a child. What is this? Who or what am I really? Who is hearing? Who sees? Who walks or talks? It's said that at an early age, Dogen lost his own mother, and that at her funeral, he watched the smoke from a stick of incense curl up into the air and disappear. She was gone. Where did she go? The great matter of life and death, right in that thin, pungent thread of smoke, fading away in a few seconds, but working its way deep into his heart, all the way into his bones. The longer we practice, the more we start to appreciate that it really does not matter if we take a koan path or the path of shikantaza, just sitting, completely sitting. In the end, both of these are the same path, and they're grounded in these two capacities. Dogen started his instruction in Fugan Zazengi, which is his instruction on how to practice, like this. The way is essentially perfect and exists everywhere. Already here, already complete. How could it be contingent on practice and realization? How could it possibly depend on causes or conditions? The truth which carries us along is sovereign and does not require our efforts. Indeed, the whole body is far beyond the world's dust. Who could believe in a way to brush it clean? The way is completely present where you are. Is it then necessary to run around in search of it? After all, this is the question that the monk was asking. Why do you fan yourself? And yet, if there's the slightest difference in the beginning between you and the way, the result will be a greater separation than between heaven and earth. If the slightest dualistic thinking arises, our minds are lost in confusion. The very moment we judge or evaluate our experience, even look at it as if witnessing it from the outside, we've already separated from our life. We have gone into thought. And then Dogen told us, you should therefore cease from practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words and following after speech, and learn to withdraw and reflect upon yourself. And of course, this is our own practice of coming together to sit, of letting ourselves become very quiet, holding still, letting our practice anchor our heart and mind. When you do so, body and mind will naturally fall away and your original face will be revealed. Your original face. And then he went on. Cast aside all involvements, cease all affairs, and let the myriad things rest. Setting everything aside, do not think of good or evil, right or wrong. Halt the flow of the mind. Cease conceptualizing, thinking, and observing, and give up even the idea of becoming a Buddha. This holds true not only for seated zazen, but all our daily activities. So these words are about how to practice and why we practice, because it is in our own practice that who we are, what we are, becomes clear to us. We meet our own minds, the mind which is already here, already deeply at rest, although it may not always feel that way. To cease all affairs and cast aside your involvements doesn't mean to leave your family or job and run off to the monastery. It actually is something much harder, just not to feed the casual random thoughts that arise continuously out of our own individual karmic conditioning, those grooves of thought that we go to again and again. To unhook from that wheel of samsara, not to feed it. Some of our thought patterns can be so very, very addictive, as if our minds were stuck in a section of a recording that just plays over and over again. We can't repress those thoughts. If we do try to wipe them out, that effort just generates more noise. But we can turn the volume down. We can let them play in the background like the rumble of distant traffic. Of course, it's not that hard to do if the content is random, but if the voice that we hear repeats negative self-talk like a sore, sticky place that we keep rubbing, it can take some firm resolve not to get hooked. Even just to say to ourselves quietly, thoughts, thoughts, can help us see that these mind clouds are all essentially vacant. They're like phantoms. Or maybe let it be, just let it be. Because we do have a choice to stay open, even as we let all these visitors have their place. Sometimes the phrase that I use, especially with really tough ones, is, hello, old friend. You know, I see you. Hello, old friend. Those difficult thoughts or memories that we wish we could let go, our place of rest and peace includes all of them too. It's just that they don't need to be seated in the front row. We learn we cannot block off parts of ourselves or make ourselves blank to realize our way. So we hold our practice close, right here, right here. In your hands, in your chest, in each step. Letting it come in all the way, even more genuine, more present. Simple, but not always easy. Sometimes it's like holding something fragile with very great care. Sometimes it's like grasping a lifeline in a turbulent ocean. But we can hold it in the most modest of moments, like brushing your teeth or reaching for the doorknob, or in your hand mudra, where your thumbs gently touch. It's like silty water. If we don't constantly stir it with thinking and figuring, the water gradually becomes clear to the bottom, which of course it was from the start. Right in this moment, what is here? Let your body be open, your mind open. Feel your seat. How are your hands positioned? The raw feeling of touch, who feels that? Who is hearing? Who is seeing? Before even an image or an explanation arises, what is this? When you look in your own mind to the place where that awareness arises, what is that? Where is that? Instead of getting distracted by thoughts or sensation in the foreground, can we look into the space in between, at the sky itself, the place between thoughts, letting that space expand? Just look, listen, rest in that place between thoughts, between sounds. Even if we feel turbulent, lost, very cloudy, just look like a child looks, as a child that you already are looks, wide open. This each of us can do. Since we have this capacity to just look, there is really nothing we cannot meet. We just watch open, and still. While it is not easy for many of us to trust, just to rest here, to stay here, is an expression of trust. To sit still, just as you are, is already trusting this moment. And it's enough. This is trusting your own path, your own unfolding. You don't even have to trust your teacher, although of course it always helps. Most important is to trust yourself, what you see, what you experience yourself. Master Daohui wrote, if you want to cut through, don't entertain doubts about Buddhas and patriarchs or doubts about life and death. Just always let go and make your heart empty and open. When things come up, deal with them according to the occasion. Be like the stillness of water, like the clarity of a mirror, so that whether good or bad, beautiful or ugly approach, you don't make the slightest move to avoid them. Then you truly know that the mindless world of spontaneity is inconceivable. You can't say anything about it. You know, Daohui wrote in such a different time and place. It was so long ago, 12th century China. And yet those words speak with the authenticity of a genuine practice. These are words of today. To let go and let our hearts be empty and open. Empty doesn't mean dead, but rather knowing that your heart already has plenty of room, plenty of space, and is able to accept whatever comes. The mindless world of spontaneity is inconceivable. A king of Eastern India invited the 27th patriarch Prajnatara for Buddhist food. The king asked, "Why don't you recite sutras?" Prajnatara said, "My inhalation does not stay in the world of subject or in the world of consciousness. My exhalation does not tangle with the world of objects. Still, I am always reciting millions and millions of scrolls of sutras." In a way, this koan is very straightforward and simple. And yet, like the wind, it enters into every corner of our lives. It's about how we live. We breathe in, we breathe out. Not tangled up with thinking or with things. When we take a moment to pause before our meal, gratitude naturally arises, and without any fuss, our eating has become an offering. When you take a breath and come into awareness as you take your seat at work, that seat has become your zafu. Daido Loori said, to see the secular as a hindrance to practice is to only know that in the secular, nothing is sacred. It is not yet realizing that in sacredness, nothing is secular. In sacredness, nothing is secular. No place the sacred does not reach. Taking a shower, we're enclosed by waters that have already passed through clouds, rain, streams, processing plants, metal pipes. The residue of our bodies is carried away. We dry off and our towels dry too. No tangling with subject or object. To enlighten is to make light, to experience light. And we have a taste of this when we experience even these small joys, when we notice and are entered by the red of a flower, the toasty smell of tea, the damp touch of a breeze, or our foot lifting to enter the house. None of us could ever truly describe what this is like to another person. We can only know it for ourselves alone. It is specific. It is unique. Yours and mine. Tasting our own practice is like that too. Prajnatara could only taste his own meal, and the king could only taste his. Each of us lifts our own spoon. The gateway to delight in our world is attention, our own awareness of this exact moment of living. Our sense doors receive colors, sounds, sensations, a tapestry of beauty, whether or not we notice. For sure, sorrow is real, loss, pain, but in those very same moments, we receive the rain glistening on a wooden walkway, the deepening of colors, the smooth cool of wood under our feet, and the hug of a friend. The poet Wordsworth wrote, "With an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things." We so often focus on what is hard, what is challenging, that we neglect the beautiful, which is already here. I find it helps me to notice something of beauty several times a day, whenever I remember. To let yourself stop for just a moment, to let that beauty enter you and replace you. I've come to think this is an important practice, a balancing practice, because so many of us tend to the negative. So much in our lives these days seems harsh, dry, sometimes very, very difficult and painful. What you make yourself available to, that can be anything, but please stay conscious. There is no thing that does not have its own innate quality and its balance. Shut your eyes and simply feel. Let your fingers explore a blanket or a railing. Maybe it's just your two thumbs touching. Just a minute to be present in this miraculous world that we inhabit. The nature of wind is permanent. What is the meaning of its reaching everywhere? Sometimes the force of that wind is so slight, so gentle, that there is nothing to notice beyond a soft freshness. Sometimes it is steady and resolute. Sometimes fierce enough to crack branches and sculpt hills, turn over our lives completely. Reaching everywhere, resting everywhere. How could we escape it? It is here. Here, of course it is, right here. Priest Pao Che found himself holding a fan, so he used it. You open your computer and type an email. Your daughter hands you a book, so you read to her, and you answer the barista, "I'd like a latte, skinny, please. Oh, and thank you. Thank you." Our life, this entire life, nowhere else. The wind blowing through you, blowing through me. No thing that is not a sutra. Thank you for inviting me to be with you. So I'm open to take a few questions if that is something that this Sangha likes to do.
Thank you, Karen, and very beautiful talks, so evocative of our practice. So as people let it soak in.
We may all be quiet. That would be okay too.
Please, if I think people know how to raise your hand in the reactions, or if you prefer to type in a question into chat, I can watch for those. We can. There was just a moment in your talk, you're just unfolding this practice, enlightenment, practicing awakening, where you said shikantaza, completely sitting. And that was just a wonderful, like that rain shower, like that immersion. Somehow that phrase has come down to us as just sitting.
Right. And the problem is that the way we talk, just means diminished a little bit. A little bit, maybe lacking something, just a little diminished. That's why I like completely sitting. Anyway, it works for me. This was, in a way, a talk about silence. And so if that's what is here, that's good. That's fine. So I see
Peg.
one hand.
Yeah, Peg, please go ahead.
I have just a comment. When you mentioned some things that come up repeatedly for you, and you say, "Welcome, old friend." I was just thinking, oh, I know things I am going to be welcoming. So thank you so much.
The image that comes to mind for me with this is, if you remember, it's such an arc. The story is such an archetype, but the Buddha sitting through the night, and how in the very darkest hours of the night, all his self-doubt arose to him. It's sometimes the story has to do with Mara and all the temptations of Mara, but really, I think far more sticky than the temptations of Mara are self-doubts, especially the habits of self-doubt, which are sometimes very ingrained. They're like these karmic grooves, and we have to learn to work with those so that we're not totally thrown off all the time, and so that they don't run our lives. And I found that, hello, old friend is a way to kind of make space for that, because this is not just about the light, this is about the dark too, all, everything all together. So that's a phrase that has helped me.
Along with that, I really appreciated your saying that just to stay here is an expression of trust.
Yeah, it is. Pema Chodron actually says that that's the essence of practice, learning to stay. Learning to stay, showing up and learning to stay. Well, thank you.
Thank you again, Karen. I think this will continue to resound.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.